Alright, so this video will go through the steps we talked about in class today about solving a two-step equation. So the first equation reads 4q plus 5 equals -3, and I'm going to use that same strategy with the what is happening to q, and so how will I solve. We also called this what I see and what I'll do. So I see that I have this variable and I see some math happening on the left side, and I end up with -3. So I want to describe what I see happening on the left. The very first thing that I see is that I'm multiplying q by 4. So what I see is multiply by 4. And if I'm thinking about how I solve an equation, the first thing, or one of the first things that come to mind should be that I'm using inverse or opposite operations. Try to undo the math that's there to isolate q or get it by itself. And so I should be thinking right now, well, the opposite of multiply by 4 would be divide by 4. And in my solution, that's what I need to do. The other math that I see as I look at this problem is that 5 is being added to 4q. So add 5. Same reasoning. My inverse or opposite of that would be in my solution, I'll subtract 5. So now you have a nice outline of what it is you need to do before you just jump in and start doing math. What I do want to point out is we talked about how solving one of these equations is like doing the order of operations in reverse. And so if I'm thinking about order of operations, the very last thing that I usually do is add or subtract. And so when I solve an equation, the very first thing that I will usually do is add or subtract. And so I'll start with this, subtract 5, and the second thing I'll do is divide by 4. I already have my line here to show that I'm going to keep my equation balanced or do the same thing to both sides of the equation. So the first thing in my pre-plan over here is I'm going to subtract 5 from each side. Now, I still have 4q. So 4q will be brought down. 5 plus, or I had plus 5 in my equation and I subtract 5. 5 minus 5 is 0. They cancel each other out. On my right side, I have -3 take away 5 more, or -3 plus -5, and so that will be -8. So now I've taken care of that. The second step I wrote is that I'll divide by 4. The way that I simplify this, as we've talked about in class, is that 4 divided by 4 is 1q, or just q. And -8 divided by 4 is -2. So I've ended up with the solution of q equals -2. Now to check it, I'm going to go back to my original equation, which was 4 times q plus 5 equals -3. Now instead of the q, I'm going to put my proposed solution of -2. So 4 times -2 plus 5. And when I do this, I'm going to put a question mark up here because we're testing to see if the left side will actually balance to equal the right side. 4 times -2 is -8. Plus 5, we still have that question mark. And then -8 plus 5 is -3. And -3 on the left is equal to the -3 that we started with on the right-hand side. So this absolutely checks out. We are going to look now at a second equation. We're going to use the same process. So our second equation is z over -5 plus 3 is equal to -2. So we're going to start out the same way. If I look at this equation, the first thing that I should notice is this fraction bar. And this fraction bar, as you already know, means division. So the operation that I see happening is divided by a -5. And this part can be a little bit tricky, but pay attention to the negative sign, because when I go to solve it, the opposite of divided by -5 is going to be multiply by -5. Don't forget about that. The very next thing that I see happening is that we added 3. So when I go to solve this equation, I'll want to do the opposite of that, which is subtract 3. So I have my plan. Now I'm actually going to do it. So the first thing, because we remember we start by undoing addition or subtraction, is we're going to subtract 3 from each side. So now I'm left with z divided by -5. This 3 minus 3 would be 0, is equal to -2 minus 3 is -5. Let me change colors. The second step that I wrote down is that I want to multiply by -5. I'm going to show you as a review why I can do this. So if I multiply by -5, that's the same as multiplying by -5 over 1. -5 times z, -5z, and 1 times -5, -5. And just like in the first example, this -5 divided by -5 simplifies to be 1z, or just z. And over on this side, -5 times -5 is equal to 25. So my solution is z equals 25. We want to go back and check that. So here's my original equation. And what I will do is, instead of the z, I will replace that with 25. And I want to know, is 25 divided by -5 plus 3 equal to -2? So 25 divided by -5 is -5. And to that I will add 3. -5 plus 3 is -2. And my left side is equal to my right side, so that is absolutely a true statement. Now, as we get more into solving equations, we're going to add distributive property and combining like terms, and eventually you'll see a variable on both sides of your equation. But eventually you should always get back to this point where you have a two-step equation, and the way that you solve this two-step equation will always look like one of the two examples we just went through.